1 2 1 2 microphone check 1 2. Greetings and welcome back once again. This is Emunah Israel, Solonomics 101, Lev Project, quote unquote Black History Month, y'all. So we have been giving it to you every Wednesday at 9 o'clock, having this conversation about the miseducation of the melanated woman, so-called Black woman. And I'm here today with our lovely guest, home panelist. Like I feel like we're on debate talk for you, right? Sister Mayanah Sofaret. She's in the building. Sister Mayanah, and this is a tired Emunah. I'm not on anything but some sorrow tea with some dandelion leaves. I was just telling Mayanah it's past my bedtime. So, please excuse me. But welcome, Sister Mayanah. How are you today?
I see I'm a little out of it too. I was just about to say book of closes. I'm doing all right.
Where you at? Thailand? He's like, good morning. No. Good morning. And you in Korea. Let me find out. Listen,
I'm so tired.
It's all good though. We're gonna bring it. We're gonna do it. This is gonna be a little, not as long as we usually go, but we're gonna get in these two portions. For those who don't know, right now we're reading out of the quote unquote Black Woman Manifesto. Did we make it available? It's man, look, y'all Google work. Put in the Black Woman Manifesto and you will bring up the PDF. You understand? We are currently on what page is this? Page 17.
I'm going to pull it up right now. I'm going into our forum, the Double Jeopardy forum that we have for the viewers on Facebook. I know for a fact that we have a copy of it there. I did send a copy to one of our viewers because she reached out to me and asked for it. So I'm going to go ahead and pick that up. Also, I believe you're correct. On page 17, we're going to look at the free labor market, right?
Yep. Would you like to read first or would you like me to read?
I think you should go ahead and start. I don't have to.
All right, no problem. For those who just joined us once again, this is reading from the Black Woman Manifesto. Oh, I have to give a little, preface. The reason why we're going into this conversation once again, this is the third series, and the reason why we're going in it because it's necessary. There's a lot of conversation that continues to be had on an ongoing basis with erroneous what I'm saying? They have long tentacles and very hairy, sticky extensions of themselves, and they morph into things that hinder our growth and productivity as a people. And so it is important to get to the crux of the matter. One of those things are blaming this, and again, we're not championing, the feminist movement, but what we are trying to do here is put the responsibility in the right space. We said it before, the feminist movement is like the boogeyman. Everybody's blaming it because it's the reason why the Black man don't have no job, and it's the reason why the Black man wants Korean women, and it's the reason why, the reason why he likes Korea. I don't know, like anything you want to blame, the reason why, his skin is ashy, I don't know, but this movement is blamed for everything. So we've done videos in the past speaking about first wave, second wave, and third wave feminism, speaking about the truth and reality of our foremothers. So after one of the shows that we did, tippy tapping on the computer, came across this Black Woman Manifesto. I never heard of it, right? I was like, Sister Mayanah, we never heard of it. And so we was like, wow, this is the voices of those who everybody keeps speaking about. So just like my, I would like to say my interest in the slave narratives, and why I'm so interested in slave narratives is because it's the voice of people who actually lived it. So I don't have to project. I don't have to make up stuff. I can actually humble myself to hear them speak to me. And so this is kind of what we're doing now with the 60s and 70s, that these people wrote. This is an anthology, if I'm not mistaken, a collection of essays and poetry and thought processes that was compiled, and they wrote it in a manifesto. So why make up stuff? People who wasn't even born at that time. Why not just hear from the people and how they actually felt about what we're accusing them of partaking of? And I wanted to say one more thing, Sister Mayanah, that video, and shout out to Brother Hezekiah News, man. I don't know where he be digging at for these gems, but he be digging in the crates. Like,
Yeah,
he's
that way.
digging in the craze. Shout out to that brother because he brings some really good, archival stuff. So he brought up this archival documentary report from like the early 70s with Lena Horne. What does it have? Nikki Giovanni.
It had Bibi Amani, the wife of Leroy Jones. It had Joan Harris. It had
it was
Giovanni. Well, it had like the heavy hitters. Let's just say it had the heavy hitters.
And so, why that was important is because these were melanated women at the time having a conversation, some of them coming from different walks of life. They were speaking about the ills of what was facing the so-called black community. And I didn't hear anybody yelling and screaming. I didn't see any neck rolling. Do you notice that? Did you see any neck rolling?
Pleasant. They were so pleasant with one another. They were even spoken. They were polite with one another.
I thought that was weird.
Even when they disagreed, they were very, and I think that what it's evidence of is that women can come together. They can have competing ideas and positions, and that we aren't as caustic and venomous as people would have us believe about ourselves. Unfortunately, we see a lot of young women who have internalized the idea that women just don't get along and cannot get along, and that it is predictable and almost inevitable that women will escalate in conversation. They will do the neck roll. They will cut one another off. They will be impolite with one another, and that it's just part of Black womanhood to do so. And I thought that it was very edifying to see our foremothers disproving that so elegantly.
Agreed. If you don't know what we're talking about, I'm gonna try to find a link so that we can put it in the box and you could take a look at that. Once again, shout out to that brother who's bringing these the documentaries he's bringing, man. Like, he got to be in the microfilm room or something. I don't know where he digging it out, but continue, my brother, continue.
Continue, right?
Yeah, continue. Everybody, and I'll say this and then I'll start. We all have a part to play, and sometimes we act as though if someone else is playing a part, we need to covet that part or we need to envy that part. Like, if he's doing what he's doing and that's his service, then hallelujah. You know what I'm saying? Hallelujah, because he's bringing things. He may say, boy, somebody's going to need this. You know what I'm saying? This is going to help further somebody's research. And he's playing that part. So I want to shout out to that brother. Thank you so much, because that was definitely a gem.
Conversation. It was, like you said, I took like 2 pages worth of notes on that conversation. It was so rich and poignant. Probably over there on the other table, though. But if we have a chance to talk about it, I'll go grab those quotes. Because some of the things the ladies were saying, I think you and I were commenting on the fact that, we think we're doing something over here, and it turns out we're just shattering echoes of these mothers who have already said everything that we're saying now.
Like cornbread lady, like the cornbread lady, like that's my kindred spirit. I promise you, like all the sisters on the panel, cornbread lady is me. Like that would be my voice in the conversation. I'm like, oh my goodness, she sounds just like me, or I sound just like her. And her disposition, although she's not rude, she's firm. You know what I'm saying? Cornbread lady, shout out to you if you still alive, cornbread lady, because you know what I'm saying? You went ahead and did the thing. I was like, yeah, get weave lady with the pearls. I mean, okay, let me stop. I don't know her name, but
listen, the lawyer, right? The lawyer from the defense fund. He was determined to kumbaya the whole movement.
Yeah. She's like,
what about the white children? Girl, you don't stop.
Yeah, she was like, yo, what about the children in Hungary? Like, what? There's like, ain't nobody worried about no. If y'all don't know what we're talking about, check the film out, man. It's on less than an hour. It's really good. But let's jump into this here. So we're on part 3, page 17, the free labor market. I think we're still reading Maxine Williams. Am I correct? This is still?
Yes, it's still Maxine Williams.
All right. She says, I mentioned earlier that after emancipation, so-called Black men had a difficult time obtaining employment. that after emancipation, he was barred from many of the crafts he had been trained in under slavery. The labor market for Black women also proved to be a disaster. I think we read this. We didn't read this already? So, or maybe I read it in my home. So-called Black women entered the needle trades in New York in 1900s as a cheap source of labor for the employers. And in Chicago in 1917, so-called Black women who were willing to work for lower wages were used to break a strike. There was general distrust between so-called Black and white, so-called white workers. And in some cities, these so-called white workers refused to work beside so-called Black women and walked off the job. I noticed that she interchanges between, when she says Black, she puts it in capital, but then when she says white, she puts it in lowercase. Well, it just may be me, but let me continue. The so-called Black woman has never held high status in this society. Under slavery, she was mated like cattle and used as mere breeding instrument. Today, the majority of the so-called Black women are still confined to the most menial and lowest paid occupations: domestic and laundry workers, file clerks, counter workers, and other service occupations. These jobs, in most cases, are not even unionized. We're going to continue. And then we're going to talk about it. One more paragraph. Today, at least 20% of Black women, or so-called, are employed as private household workers, and their median income is $1,200. These women have the double exploitation of first doing drudgery in someone else's home, and then having to take care of their own households as well. Some are forced to leave their own children without adequate supervision in order to earn money by taking care of someone else's children. 61% of the so-called Black women married were in the labor force in 1966. Let me say that part again, because the thought is the feminism that came a few years later is the one that caused the Black woman who was happily in her house to go to work. But according to this statistic, she says 61% of these melanated married women, married now, you had a husband, but you needed to help compensate, were in the labor force in 1966. Almost 1/4. And this is some Mayanah statistics, because this reminds me of what he was quoting as well. Almost 1/4 of these Black families are headed by females, double the percentage for whites, also called. Due to the shortage of quote unquote, and then she's perpetuating this thought now, due to the shortage of quote Black men, most Black women are forced to accept a relationship on male terms. In Black communities, there sometimes exists a type of serial polygamy, a situation where many women share the same man, one at a time. Now, this is some juicy stuff here, Mayanah, because she done said the P word. That might just, somebody might just send out little, unheard little signals. Next thing you know, the birdies start flocking to the Jeezy. She got the P word in that joint. Guys, be careful now. I told you I'm sleepy. Please don't give me the mic. But yeah. Where we want to start from? I
think we should start from the idea of, first she brings out the point that there is a particular labor market, and then she says that the women were brought in. These are not women that are being brought in because they are employable. They're being brought in because they are strike work. They're strike breakers. And that means that the white women have abandoned their posts and they just need somebody to fill it. And so these Black women are not being hired because of their, what is it they say? Oh, it's so easy for Black women to be employed because the system loves us. This is not what's happening here. Also, there isn't, again, this kumbaya kind of environment. Instead, what she's saying is that the white women, the so-called white women, and our sisters had a conflict. They were not the best of friends, and they disliked each other. There was no camaraderie between these two women. So I think that's one misconception we should observe and then put to rest. The next thing she says is that, like you pointed out before, that these are married women who are going out to work, and they're going out to work because it's necessary and not because they are in competition with or are attempting to berate the men, but rather that they're trying to, feed their children. And also what we see here is the type of work that they're employed in. These are not spaces that in the other article that I want to give a little bit of time to, we'll do it next week when I have it in front of me, and she'll give us more statistics and more facts. But the idea here is that the type of work that the women are going in for is not competitive labor. The men are not going to be going to wash anybody's laundry or to do the type of things that the women were going in to do. They weren't going into the needlework industry. They weren't going into domestic labor. They weren't going into housekeeping. They're not competing. They're not stealing anybody's job. They're not stealing jobs away from the men. They are employed only in these spaces that would accommodate them as women. This is not a male-female competition in terms of employment, and I think that's an important point that we can acknowledge and also then put to bed. And then, of course, as you said, she goes into the idea of polygyny, or a type of polygyny that starts to get revisited, with the idea of there are less men than women at this time. And this other article, and I don't think she touched on it, but the other woman does talk on it, that there's an idea that there are more men than women that begins to circulate. And there's as she maps out through time, she talks about how in the beginning, when slavery began, there were more men than women. And that begins to decrease as more women are brought over for this other type of labor. But for the most part, all the way up until 1950, we're still pretty much one man for one woman. But what happens is that the men start to engage in high risk activity, just like now, or become targeted for different reasons. And so the numbers become skewed, but they don't become skewed to the extent that this has to happen. But what happens is there's a greater concentration of men in one part of the country. And so the sister talks about this kind of migration of the women to where the men are, because it's not that the men and women aren't still in equal numbers. They're just not in equal numbers in the same place at the same time. So that's why this condition of polygyny starts to, or serial monogamy or whatever, starts to happen because of these conditions. But like you said, because it is the P word, and because it's very textured and it has all these different facets to it, it's something that we should probably kind of put a pin in until we can really do it from a position where we're not both half asleep and in want of a bit of rest. I don't know why waking up in the middle of the night to research things and note things down has become a thing. But yeah, I kind of want to clock out around 9:32.
I wanted to say that as she was just speaking here, thank you for that, Sister Mayanah. We're gonna read one more section. As she was speaking here, what came to my mind, and I'm a little late because I'm not really a big movie watcher, but what came to my mind is that, well, a few things. The movie The Help, that illustrates this menial labor of having to leave your home to go to someone else's home, to neglect your own home. The beginnings of the latchkey children that already existed since slavery. Slavery created this latchkey system of children being unattended while their parents did labor for someone else, and you being secondary. We have adopted a lot of those traits. But one thing that happened in the movie is when the European woman became so interested in the story of The Help, and you said you had the Maid Diaries as well, correct? That you were talking about that book. One thing that happened was when the woman came and asked her about her son, and something happened and she didn't want to talk about it, the melanated woman, because she wasn't home. If I remember the story correctly, she wasn't there, the maid narratives. And so this is a whole culture of our foremothers. Both of my physical grandmothers came from the Caribbean and came to America and worked in hotels. You understand what I'm saying? A lot of people, and worked in hotels in maid service. Do you understand what I'm saying? So this is not something so far removed that you can't understand that the thought process was that you had to leave your family to help sustain your family. And as a mother, that having to be not more, what's the word I'm looking for? It was kind of more like a mandate as opposed to an option. You understand? So when, like you said, you're not taking the jobs from your husband, but the European is taking the jobs from your husband. So now as the feminine principle, you're looking to compensate, and then you could end up short on the back end with the children. And what I find funny is going forward, it's the single mothers who ruin the children. It's like, wait, hold up. What created this? Like she's saying in 1965, this high percentage of single mothers did? Like, these are the questions that we have to begin to ask. Like, what created the circumstance and situation for Johnny to run away? Did the single mother did? Or did she beg to become a single mother? Or is there some circumstances and situations that we're not talking about, and then we only want to point the finger? Oh, so she wanted to be impoverished. You know what I'm saying? That's what you're saying. She was just like, yeah, you know what? This is a good look right here. You know, these are the conversations that we have to keep looking a little deeper, because it becomes problematic again as we're looking at, and where did my little thing go? When we're looking at what our foremothers and forefathers were actually saying, and that's what we're going to go into next here. What they were actually saying. So that's my little 2 parts of that. Oh yeah, one more thing. And the movie that I just went to go and see, what's the name of it?
Hidden Figures.
Hidden Figures.
I cannot believe you went to see that without me.
Look, and thousands of miles away. Mayanah lives in Brooklyn. But
I already hear that part.
Look, people, Mayanah lives in Brooklyn, okay? Emunah is all the way in Florida. But here's the interesting thing. I couldn't help but thinking during the whole movie, which this is the 60s now. And during the whole movie, they're like working for NASA. I think they live in Virginia. And maybe it's just one too many books I've read and researched. And I'm thinking to myself, where are their children? Because they have children, you know what I'm saying? And they're in this male dominated, and that's for a whole nother conversation, but they're in this male dominated space. And the same way that they're talking about women being subjugated to inferior positions amongst the European women at home, that's the same way they had them in this Nassau environment. And then he's like, well, call your wives and tell them that you're going to be going home late because you have to work to get this man in the space. And the man, funnily, she's the wife, and he hands her the phone. And I'm thinking, well, who's she gonna call? You know what I'm saying? It's like, call your wives. Okay, you are the wife, so who's the next line of defense?
Right.
So for me, that kind of illustrated men have somebody to lean on. That somebody is the feminine principle. Who does she have to lean on? And so when you look at that and keep trying to compare him dropping the ball to her dropping the ball, and him having the responsibility to her having the responsibility, like I like to tell Mayanah, the last one holding the bag, you know what I'm saying? Possession is what, 9/10 of the law? So that last person holding the bag, that's who everybody is blaming. And so we could continue to talk about that, but welcome those who just joined us. We are reading the Black Woman Manifesto. 2 tippies on your Google, YouTube, Bing, whatever. It'll pull it up. Or, oh, you know what? Here you go. I will also put in the box. I'm gonna be nice, Sister Maya. I'm gonna be nice. I'm gonna be nice. I'm gonna be nice today, you know. I'm gonna drop it in the box. But we're gonna read on now. We're gonna read on. Read on. Black is beautiful.
Read on. Black is beautiful. That's the title of this section. As if Black women did not have enough to contend with, being exploited economically as a worker, being used as a source of cheap labor because she is female, and being treated even worse because she is so-called Black. She also finds herself fighting the beauty, quote, standards, close quote, of the so-called white Western society. Years ago, it was a common sight to see so-called Black women wearing blonde wigs and rouge, the object being to get as close to the white beauty standard as one possibly could. But in spite of the fact that bleaching creams and hair straighteners were used, the trick just didn't work. Her skin was still black instead of fair, her hair still kinky instead of straight. She was constantly being compared to the so-called white woman, and she was the antithesis of what was considered beautiful. Usually when she saw a black man, a so-called black man, with a so-called white woman, the image she had of herself became even more painful. Shall we continue, or we're going to comment there? It's only one other paragraph, so we're going to continue?
Hold on. Yeah, continue, and then we'll backtrack.
But now, quote, black is beautiful, close quote, and the so-called black woman is playing a more prominent role in the movement. But there's a catch. She still is being told to step back and let the so-called black man come forward and lead. It is ironic that at a time when all talents and abilities should be utilized to aid in the struggle of national liberation, Stokely Carmichael comes along and declares that the position of women in the movement is, quote, prone, end quote. And some years later, Eldridge Cleaver, in referring to the status of women, said they had P power. Now, the P there is standing for the feminine reproductive spaces. P for that. Power. Since then, the Black Panther Party has somewhat altered its view, saying, quote, women are our other half, close quote. When writing their political statement, the Republic of New Africa stated that they wanted the right of all black men to have as many wives as they could afford. This was based on their conception that this is the way things were in Africa. Parenthetically, she adds, in their publication, The New Africa, written in December 1969, one of the points in their Declaration of Independence, quote, seeks to assure quality of rights for the sexes, close quote. Whether this means that the so-called black woman would be allowed to have as many husbands as she can afford, I have no way of knowing. And she closes the parentheses with that. And so ends that portion of the essay.
All right, for those who just joined us, I did my due diligence. I dropped the GZ in the box for you guys. Thank you for reading that, Sister Mayanah. We're on page 17. We just read the first two tonight. You know, we're going to take it easy today because the other one is about abortion and birth control. That's going to go ahead and need its own spot. You know what I'm saying? But I think as it relates to what she's saying, again, they're speaking for themselves, which I find interesting. It's not the male counterpart, neither the European or the European woman who's speaking, or male. It is the melanated woman who's speaking her thoughts concerning what she's seeing and what she's hearing, and why she's doing what she's doing. These standards go back to when they first became compromised. You know what I'm saying? Right. These issues, these self-esteem issues, these indifferences. When you was combing Becky Ann's hair, you know what I'm saying, and wondering to yourself why Becky Ann's life is better, you know what I mean, and yours is not, you get to start to have these ideas that the closer you are to this European, it's not that it just came out the sky like you just a self-hating Negro. No, this was embedded into you. You know what I'm saying? You know, hey, darky, hey, little nigger, come here. Like, this was the conversation. We would shudder to think about the emotional and verbal abuse, outside of the physical abuse, the emotional and verbal abuse that they were under on a daily, ongoing basis. That's why I call it the biggest institution of domestic violence there ever was. Because you have verbal abuse, you have sexual abuse, you have physical abuse, you have neglect. Like, tell me what domestic violence situation got all of the qualifiers. You know what I'm saying?
Exploitation of her labor.
Exploitation of her labor. So when we talk about this, what I look is like it's compounded. By the time you get to this point, you know what I'm saying? By the time you get to where they at now, the 70s, it has been compounded. They haven't been out of slavery but 105 years. Because 1970, 115 years. It's not that long. So they would have known a grandparent who could tell them some stories. And you were told that it's because you're dark, it's because you're black, it's because you're ugly. Remember the Sealy portion? You even see it in color purple. You show is ugly, Miss Sealy. You understand what I'm saying? And this had been like what the sister like to say, brother, Sister Mayanah, internalized oppression. You know what I'm saying? Our foreparents internalized the oppression so much so it still lives today. That you will have people, I hear them. I'm not one of them, but I hear them, and I because I didn't personally grow like that, it makes me go like, huh? They will see 2 or 3 or 4 children, and the first thing they do is look at their shades and begin to start to classify them. I've seen it. I come from the Caribbean. People think colorism doesn't happen in the Caribbean. That's not true. The first thing they're going to do, that one you're ready, that one you're darky, that one the brownie. They have red, they will classify as Sister Mayanah's color. Brown would be, what they would say is my color, you're brown. And then dark is anybody darker than brown. And I don't know where the cutoff is. Like, I don't know, I don't know if they got a paper bag in their backpack, because I'm like, okay, where's the cutoff? Like, where's that little transition between red and brown? Like, yeah, one more. Anyway, my point is,
the cusp, right?
Yeah, you're like, yeah, you just one tint over red, you into brown now. But it has been internalized. So she's asking the question, for me, Black is beautiful. And she's talking about the exploitation of her labor and not valuing you for who you are. This has been from the beginning. Your labor has been exploited with no value attributed to it, exploiting your body, exploiting your offspring. And she's like, well, what's the other thing? What do you do when you are when you have an oppressor that you feel is better than you and more powerful you? And then you're gonna look to emulate that person. And that's where she's speaking about this white standard of beauty. There was a woman, what's her name? Frances Ann Kemble. Took me a while. And this slave, she came from Europe, and then she came and married a man during slavery, and the mid 1800s. Anyway, she didn't know that his family was a slave owning family. So when one of his relatives died, he inherited a plantation down in Georgia. You could read the book, Frances Ann Kendall, just look her up, the Journal of a Georgia Plantation, something like that now. So like, I don't got the book right now, and I'm not about to, but look her up. Anyway, she was discussing the truth, because she didn't write this journal. It's her real journal. So she wasn't writing this with the intent that you Negroes were going to read it. So she was being brutally honest. Like, for real, you Negroes can't read. I don't really expect you to be in my personal boudoir. Anyway, long story short, I say that to say what she was writing in it is their true feelings about how they would look at slaves. Oh, their skin is so beautiful. But outside, they say, you so ugly. You know what I'm saying? Their teeth are so white. But do you understand what I'm saying? I'm like, okay, you're the crazy person. Oh, when they're the beautifulest children when they're born. They're classifying you. Oh, he was a handsome man. I'm like, wait, hold up, your old lady. You're like, what's all of this? You know what I'm saying? But on the other part, you're calling people dirty, Black, imps. Do you understand what I'm saying? So this dichotomy existed within themselves, and they were constantly measuring what you had that they didn't. And before you, right, they would demonize it. Behind you, they would objectify you, and they would, later on go to put Botox in their lips. I'm just saying. Anyway, Sister Mayanah, we could see what they did later. Get a little lipo, get a little injection, and now you really see what they really wanted all along. What are your thoughts on that, Sister Mayanah?
Well, I want to go to address some of the other things that you're saying. Because on the other side of it, where she's living in the time and space that she's occupying, we have magazines that are ostensibly for so-called Black people, like Ebony, looking blacker than Ebony. Oh, Jet, which is the blackest gem possible, Jet. So you have magazines like Ebony and Jet that are selling their advertising space to these companies that are telling you that you need to have wigs that are have straight hair or blonde hair. She's talking about these things, about these blonde wigs and this rouge and this way of looking more European. This is in their Black magazines, in the so-called Black magazines. So if you were to have a safe space, you would think it would be in your own media, in your own presses. But if you have this space that should be a safe space, also telling you that there's something wrong with who you are and what you look like and the hair that comes out of your head, that all of these things need to be changed in order for you to be acceptable. if these are not the European magazines, this is not Elle, this is not Mademoiselle, this is not Cosmo, this is Jet, this is Ebony telling you you don't measure up. This is your people telling you you don't measure up. So there's no safe space. There's no safe space. And she's saying, okay, fine. So even when these women, these melanated women attempt to conform, they still can't escape the reality that these are just accoutrements that they have borrowed to fabricate a sort of so-called white identity. But they're still who they are. At the end of the day, they're going to be treated as a marginalized individual or marginalized person in the country. And she said that that's a reality that you kept getting confronted with no matter where you tried to maneuver yourself out of it. So I think that that kind of dichotomy is also, really significant, because again, like I'm saying, there's no safe space. Not even your own presses are giving you any kinds of accolades for who you are. So that's instantly problematic. I think we're in the film that we saw, the YouTube documentary that the brother shared, there was Lena Horne was asked by the sister. She was like, remember the part where she asked the sister, so why do you think that Billie Holiday fizzled out and Diane Carroll fizzled out, but you're still here? And the poem that she wrote for her, and she said that, and Lena Horne said, it's because they made me, or they fashioned me after these so-called white women. And Lena understood that. And she felt the weight and the burden of that. She said, I didn't want to see my sisters fizzle out like that. She said that Lena Horne said that Billie Holiday and Diana Carroll was her first introduction to sisterhood. So that meant something to her. And it meant something to watch them not succeed. And the fact, and to have to shoulder the burden of understanding that the only reason that she was still somewhat relevant, even in after all of them had fizzled out, despite being arguably more talented than she is, or even more beautiful than she was, that what kept her and what gave her longevity was the fact that she was palatable to Europe, or to the so-called white people. And it was really, like I said, a lot of the conversations that we heard our mothers say on that panel, extremely poignant, extremely relevant, and credit. It's just it's immeasurable how valuable it is to hear them speak for themselves. And I think that this I have queued up here parts of a conversation from Baldwin, but I'll hear your thoughts and then share it afterwards.
All right, yeah. For those who just joined us, this is Double Jeopardy. We're speaking about the double jeopardy of quote unquote Black womanhood. We're reading from and adding other parts of research, but the base of the conversation is from the Black Woman Manifesto. I put the link in the box. We read 2 portions, so if you want to keep up for next week, you can go ahead and read ahead. Right now, we're on the portion that is Black is Beautiful, and we're speaking about the thought processes of the Black Panther Party at that time, James Brown, I'm Black and I'm proud. This conversation of I'm going to take what you're using to curse me and use it as something that is going to empower me. And I think behind that is still the need to prove to the person who's oppressing you that you're not hurting me, when in actuality you're hurting me. So it's a very strange thing. It's like someone embracing the B word, like they have done in 2017, you know what I mean? And all the years leading up to it. You're calling me something and I'm going to take it and internalize it and then make it a cool thing. And it's to a people who the nationality is not Black. You know what I'm saying? So to a certain degree, it served its purpose. But then when we come in, that's why you hear us in 2017 saying so-called, because it's still accepting basically Toby. You know what I'm saying? It's still accepting that conversation that your name is Toby. You know what I mean? And the reality is your name is not Toby. Right. Wherever you came from, you weren't called Black. You know what I mean? You had a nationality, you had a tribe, you had a culture. And so even throwing off that level, for our foreparents, it was enough to say, I'm going to reject Negro and I'm going to take Black. And then I'm going to say Black is beautiful. You know what I mean? And then for their children and their grandchildren and now to come and say, no, that's still even not enough. Because it's the levels of consciousness that we go through to return back to our natural mind. Because right about now, you know, we're coming out of the space where we lost our natural mind. And so we're looking at, what's this system in the 70s? So we're looking at some 40 plus years ago that, you know, they didn't have a problem with saying, you know what, this is beautiful. Why did they need to say it was beautiful? Because someone told them it was ugly. You know what I'm saying? So this is kind of their retort to this is my response to what you're saying. And my question is, at some point in time, we have to stop responding to that person or that system who's already told us, I'm your enemy. You know what I'm saying? So, you know what I mean? At some point, you got to put, you know, who's the players in the game and be like, okay, I don't really need to be responding to you. You know what I mean? Because if I do that all day, I'm not really going to get to the space that I really need to be in. Right. And so hopefully that's where we're growing in this consciousness. Although I still hear today, you know, black is beautiful. You know what I'm saying? We're still kind of a little bit in that space.
It's almost like we're not even saying it to ourselves. We're trying to convince the other.
Yes. I know I am, but you know, but so what are you? You know what I'm saying? That kind of still in that back and forth, that push and pull that like you need to prove. I need to measure myself against you. No, I don't need to measure myself against you. Like, who are you? You know, you know what I'm saying? And so when we get to, and that's what my cornbread kindred sister was saying. She was like, huh?
The other sister with the head wrap said, she said, we need to stop trying to, she said, these definitions are alien. She said, we need to stop trying to define something that's already defined for us and start looking into redefining. Man, if I just stand up and start applauding, man,
you guys need to watch that video. You really do. The video is what's up, Judith? Yeah. Yeah, y'all gotta watch that video because, like she said, it has some moments in there where you're like, yeah. And that's what I'm saying. Basically, we're still needing to prove. You know, you don't see anybody. You know, Turkish is beautiful. You know what I'm saying? And I mean, German is beautiful. Like they're talking about their nationalities, their land, their places where they belong. And because we've lost all of that, and we're just still grasping to a certain degrees at straws, and because, you know, to my observation, there's certain things that because it hurts in that area, we're not willing to really investigate and accept. Like, there were different people. People don't, they say, why can't all black people get along? And I'm like, if you say that one more time, they wasn't getting along on the continent. Let's keep it real. They're different. Right now, there is a mixture of different people groups. So if it doesn't vibe with a certain person, it may just be because they're not part of your people group. Just because they're melanated doesn't mean they're you. Every other part of the world understands that. Whether it's right or wrong, it is what it is. If you go to, even when they came to the continent of America, North America, you had different Indian people groups here.
Yep.
The Europeans said, you're Indians. And they said, no, we're Chickasaw. No, we're Seminoles. No, we're Blackfoot. No, they said they were their tribal orientations. They did not say, kumbaya, we're all Indians. That didn't happen. You see? And because we all had the same traumatic experience of this transatlantic slave trade, we think that that's enough to hold us together. And history has bore out, it is not. The European understood that because they knew exactly where they were taking you from. And they actually have it in their notes. This person is a Guinea man. This person is a Mandingo. This person is an Igbo. So, you know, I say all of that to say, in my estimation, it will help us in the fighting, or that feeling. And I'm going to read some of the comments. That feeling of always needed to say, why can't we all just get along? And why it doesn't have to be like this? It will help. It helped me. That's all I have to say in bringing clarity. And it's not some fairy tale fallacy that I told myself. It's during the research and understanding that the truth is, you had different melanated people with different culture, different ideology, different systems of worship that came here. You came from the Gold Coast, you came from the Ivory Coast, you came from the slave, what they later named the Slave Coast. They didn't pick you from the same place. And when you on the continent, the chances are you weren't friends either. And so it's okay. I'm going to read this one, and then we're going to come back to Sister Mayanah. We have here, B. Park says that is exactly what the sister in the white was saying in the video. Sister in the white, which one was that, sis? You know, I just remember them by, I forgot which one that was.
Maybe the David Slater, who was the head of the Harlem Drug Center.
Oh, the one in the middle, the one who had on like the chinchilla looking jacket.
Yeah,
chinchilla. Okay, chinchilla. Okay, yeah, she was going in too, but that's we might have to talk about that one another day. They defined us, and us need to see clearly, feel within. We are different. That won't bond us. You know, and that's from Sister Judith. Welcome, Sister Judith. Look, I'm like, we need a dose of reality, people. We need a dose of reality. If you get a whole lot of substandard, subpar materials, you may be able to make them stick together, but it won't be a strong house. And so when we get into the space of allowance, allowing the Creator to bring together those who are like-minded that are of Him, then it will help to bond. Like when we artificially try to force people in spaces, then we get adverse results. And some of the things, because we don't want to come to terms with that. Sometimes the first time you met another melanated people or person or your foreparents, you was in their excrement. Like that's the introduction. You know what I'm saying? You see it illustrated a whole lot of times on some of these slave movies, but that's truth though. That you didn't know the person, you didn't know their language, you didn't know their culture, and the first time you saw them was in this traumatic situation. So there's something called trauma bonding. I'll talk about it another day, but you can look it up, trauma bonding, and why we have this oftentimes love-hate relationship with one another, because oftentimes that energy is at the root of it. Oh, the one with the cornrow. Yeah, that's my homie right there, sis. The one with the one with the braids.
Bibi Amini Baraka. That's Leroy Jones' wife, Mrs. She's the only one who had the Mrs. in front of her name. When it popped up, she made sure it said Mrs.
I can't
Bibi. It did. Amina Baraka. You had to know that was.
Oh, her name is Emunah. Cornbraid. Her name is Emunah. No wonder.
Bibi.
No wonder she's a kindred spirit. That's the same as Emunah. I knew that spirit. I promise you, Emunah and Emunah in Arabic is the same thing. Hebrew is Emunah or Emunah, and in Arabic is Amina, which is the same word. And I knew her. See, she had the same vibration. But she did. I was like, yeah, you my 70s mommy. But what was I gonna say? For those who just joined us, we're gonna wind down a little bit today. Sister Mayanah said she wanted to do something quickly from so we Baldwin. Baldwin. We talked about the P power from Eldridge Cleaver. We're gonna do some more research on that. I wasn't able to do my usual, and Sister Mayanah as well, our usual digging on that conversation. But apparently it did cause a stir during that time.
Oh yeah, Eldridge was not cool, but I believe that Stokely Carmichael, when he said that the only position for women in SNCC was prone, and he was saying that in jest, and it ballooned out of, and many took it was like, wait, what did you say? I don't even care if you were joking. That's not funny. And they made books about it.
Wow.
But Eldridge, he's the one that kind of took that P power and being very crass about the female in terms of this very sexual space. I think he may have authentically been vulgar, and it's just Stokely Carmichael that was taken out of context. From what I remember, like I said, it's something that I had to do. I looked into a long time ago, but I want to look into it again because I don't remember which one of them, but one of them was talking about, the white woman's lower regions smelled better. Like it would tasted better. It was really weird. Like he had this.
All right, Mayanah, we're going to need some sources on that. No rhetoric, Sister Mayanah. We're going to need some sources on that. Don't be giving us no false information.
Oh yeah. Let me because even when I give source information, there'll be someone in the comment section.
Can you substantiate that assertion, sister? Let's we're gonna get a long email. We're gonna get a whole dissertation about how you were able to substantiate your claim that Elder Screamer was talking about somebody's hinder parts, sister.
I said it was definitely one of them. It wasn't Stokely though. It was
I want us to strike it from the record. Let's go ahead and strike that from the record. Sister Mayanah has to substantiate that last claim.
I will substantiate.
I'll give not you produce rhetoric.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Let's not taint our record of.
Yeah. That's all we need is a hinder part claim. Like, yeah, they were saying that the brother said, and like, dang, like them sisters is bugged out. We gave you one sources, and Mayanah messed around and gave you, a vague memory, and then all of a sudden,
Record note that it was a vague memory. It was not meant to.
Yeah, them sisters is off. Them sisters is off, man. They was talking about elders and stuff. Yeah, them sisters.
Yeah, right. We were talking bad about the elders.
Nah, not even. But again, if you look it up, it does say that he coined it. But again, I want more sources on the matter. And so I was just talking to Mayanah a little in the green room about it. One more thing before Mayanah goes to the thing, I don't want to, I know we touched on a little bit about it, is this thought process that the man didn't let you practice. And wait, let me rewind. The economic powerhouse.
Oh wow, let's go back to the other P word.
Yeah, back to the P word. 1 second. I just got I got a new spring in my step. Let me drink some of my tea here. Right? This thought process that is happening in 2017, that the saving grace of the Black community is polygamy. This is why it's important to read what our forefathers said, because in this point, when she's writing this, she's saying that within the community, there existed this type of thought process. But at that time, it did not save the so-called Black community, right? Because it still progressed in the way that it was going. From my studies in slavery, this also existed, this thought of, because there's not enough men sharing the men, and this is going to create a system that's going to, that didn't save the so-called Black community either. So when we begin to regurgitate these thoughts and not tethering them in things that have come before and thought processes, there was a time the European didn't care what you did. He didn't care about your sexual morality. Are you kidding me? He didn't make you get married. A lot of times our ancestors had to, it's only at the end when the European was trying to prove to other peoples in the North that they was Christian, did they begin to push their religion on them. I've read countless accounts that said the slave master didn't care if you went to church. And a lot of melanated people just wanted the ability to have their own little reprieve and their own little Bible session. And when they did begin to allow them, they would have their overseers. So there's time periods that we have to break down slavery into. And a lot of the things that we saw that happen, like not reading and writing, the pressure of not reading and writing came at the latter portion when abolition was at a high and a lot of pamphlets and things of that nature were circulating. And because they didn't want to rouse the niggers, okay, they started to make these laws. So when you look at the time frame that these laws were being passed, time frame is very important. You begin to see they were passed towards the latter end. For a lot of spaces, or even if they had them on the books, they weren't enforcing them. I say that to say, stop with these sweeping generalizations. They did not have a problem with you seeding up everybody on everybody's plantation. And then you had some people who said, you know what, then they wanted to begin to teach their slaves how to be good Christians. And that was only for show a lot of the times. A lot of them did not care. So the thought that polygamy, back to the conversation, is a saving grace for the Black community, when it didn't save the Black community in slavery, it didn't save the Black community after slavery, it didn't save the Black community during the civil rights, then I would have to ask someone, if it wasn't during slavery, after slavery, and during civil rights, then how now are we going to recycle this thought process back again and tout it as the answer, the best thing since sliced bread and penicillin? Like, help me to understand, why are we doing this without the proper research? Why are we making videos and circulating it all over YouTube world, you know what I'm saying, social media, and leading people into spaces that they become trapped? Why are we doing that? Like, why? Like, Mayanah, why?
It sounds good. We tend to romanticize things that we're not familiar with. That's, when we think about the continent, we tend to romanticize it. Look at all of these people who claim to be proponents of Mr. the Egyptian movement. You would think that Africa was one block, because they talk about Africa and completely are divorced from the idea that there are several tribes, there are several cultures, there are several pantheons of deities that they separate knowledge, and you cannot go and say I'm pro-Africa like it's one block. It just isn't. But that proves our disconnect from the continent, because we don't think about it in a rational space. If there's a sister that said to me, I know somebody who lives in New York. Do you know her? New York is not one block.
That's all, and I was just about to say that, like, if you say New York, this is how you know if the person is really from New York. A person from New York does not say they're from New York when they're in New York.
That's right.
A person from New York who's really from New York, I'm from Brooklyn. And if
that's
you're
right.
from Brooklyn, a person from Brooklyn doesn't say I'm from Brooklyn. They rep.
I'm from Flatbush.
I'm from Flatbush. I'm from East Flatbush. I'm from Crown Heights. I'm from Bushwick. I'm from Bedford Stuyvesant. You start to name, and then if you want to get, so you, like you said, that shows you the disconnect, because Queens people culture. Shout out to Queens people, you know, with your lawns and stuff. Queens culture is very different from Brooklyn culture.
Indeed.
When you're actually there, Staten Island, like, who goes to Staten Island? I'm sorry, shout out to all the people who live in Staten Island, but who goes to Staten Island? Like, I'm just saying, like, I don't even remember ever being to Staten Island. My point is,
and you have people. What you said before, I live in Brooklyn. Okay, I'm from Indiana, but I live in Brooklyn. And for some reason, I don't like anything going on in the Bronx.
Nothing. I was just gonna say that.
But everybody in Brooklyn has a problem with the Bronx
for some strange reason.
Right, but that's the thing. But if you're from somewhere else, you just say New York, and you think we all get along. And the fact that Opa is from Harlem. I'm from Brooklyn. Every opportunity, he will say something about Brooklyn just to irritate me, because he's from Harlem. Uptown, and I'm from Brooklyn, right? So it's just that. And Opa and I have probably the best brother-sister relationship on the planet, but that's still that thing.
That's what you want to say about the continent. It's kind of like New York is this microcosm, like you're saying, because I know people there's some people who never left Brooklyn. If you tell them the Bronx, might as well tell them to go to Virginia, because in their mind, that's how far the Bronx is. Like the Bronx.
It's true.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you just said something nasty, dirty, despicable to them. You know what I'm saying? Is it true? Am I lying, Sister Mayanah? Is it true?
That is the truth.
It is
Hallelujah.
True. The Bronx. Like what happens in the Bronx? I'm sorry, why is the Bronx so dirty and nasty? Like, I'm not saying shout out to everybody from the Bronx. I'm just saying I never lived in the Bronx. I'm a Brooklyn girl, but I'm just saying, my point is, if you are familiar with it, you wouldn't,
Bronx is far.
This is what everybody, like, Bronx is the last stop on the train. Like, you have to drive it. But okay, we're digressing. But the point,
Bronx, but I'm not.
But no, the Bronx is, and again, like you said, everybody has these little quirks about where they're from, and Queens people are soft. I heard, that's what I heard. I'm not saying they are. I'm just saying, And then I have a cousin who, when she comes to Brooklyn, I can't stand Brooklyn. Brooklyn is so dirty. Like all of these thought processes. My point is, just like Sister Mayanah is saying, if you're connected in that space, you would understand it. If you're disconnected from that space, you would say, what you know this person, they live in New York, and you're like, out of how many millions of people? Probably not. You know what I'm saying? So
I don't know my name. Okay.
So that's bad, Mayanah. But so it's kind of like the content.
I don't know.
You have to be a little more specific. Once we gain more understanding, once we come out of the generalizations and the stereotypes, and wanting to bring everybody along. Now, if you go out of New York, they're gonna say I'm a New Yorker, but inside New York, they're gonna say I'm a Brooklynite. I don't even know what they call people from Queens. What do they call people from Queens?
You know what's interesting about Queens? Oh, I don't know. You guys are like, who cares? This is more about New York than I really want to know. But in Queens, the people in Queens, you know how we used to say Brooklyn. If I were to address an envelope, it would say Brooklyn, New York. That's where I am. But in Queens, they are so specific. They go by neighborhood.
Yeah, Queens. Yeah.
It doesn't say Queens, New York. It says whatever their neighborhood is.
Rosedale. Yeah, they go Rosedale. They go Springfield. They go
Yeah, St. Albans.
St. Albans. Yeah.
That's a neighborhood, but they put their zip code, their state, and their hood. That's it.
Oh, I'm sorry. See, we have Staten Island in the house. What do you call? Shout out to Queen Ladera. I knew we had to have, but I know what you mean. Don't worry, repping Staten Island. I've never been. That's bad. But you see, this is proving our point. I don't ever think I've been to Staten Island. Like, I don't know.
I have.
See, Mayanah, you just saving grace. Mayanah has been to Staten Island, and Emunah, but
very, very pretty. It kind of looks like you're going to like some old, like not even like going into like the past or something. There's lots of grass, big like kind of prairie looking spaces, and you get to ride the ferry to get there.
Look, I have to refer to a friend. I have to ask the friend, did the person used to live in Staten Island? And then next time I'll tell y'all if I've been to Staten Island, because I think he used to live in Staten Island. We'll find out.
Did you have to get on the little boat and go on the ferry?
I ain't going no ferry. Don't you remember the last time the ferry had a problem? And anyway, but my point is,
I went to Staten Island.
Nah, I think I did drive to Staten Island one time, and I have to retract that. But the point is, y'all can obviously tell that we're sleepy because we're talking about Brooklyn. The point is, Mayanah brought that whole thing up. Shout out to Queen Ladera repping Staten Island. And the point is, this is how it is on the continent. It's how it is anywhere you go once it gets localized. You have people, you have culture, you have history. And here's something that I do. I've said it before. I'm not telling everybody to do it because the movies is kind of wild. But for cultural appropriation, and you want to look at certain things in the context, Mayanah likes Korean movies. I'm putting Mayanah out there. You know what I'm saying? This is where she gets her cultural fix. I like, maybe it's the Jamaican.
That's how I don't like, I don't do Hebrew drama. That's how I escape all of the Hebrew drama. I go into somebody else's culture
and do their drama. And so that's what I do. I do because they remind me of Caribbean people, Nigerians, although they're very loud. It's very, sometimes the babies be like, what in the world? So I can't watch it all the time because it's always, but they will show you in working order how things, if they're too loud, Ghanaians are not that loud. So you might want to watch Ghanaian. Some Kenyans have some of their own shows. My point is you begin to see some of the culture as it works off the paper, out of the ether and into actuality. You will begin to see what everyone is talking about is so normalized. I'll say this and then see, I said I was going to let Mayanah do the thing. I was reading one narrative and the man said a slave narrative. And in the slave narrative, he says that his father was a nobility. okay? And he brought in another woman without consenting the mother. This is a slave narrative, okay? And I have to get exactly which one it was so that y'all can see it for yourself. And the mother was upset, and the mother left. But I thought it was all good on the continent. I thought that this is the way it got down. Like, you just threw another Isha up in there, and the mother got upset, and she went back to her matrilineal home, because they used to do that. Like, yo, I'm not feeling you right now. I'm going back to my Abba house. Long story short, the mother along the way couldn't maintain the son, and she lent him out to be a manservant to a dude along the way. My point is, the catalyst for her leaving home was this thought process of the man exercising his right to introduce other people into their marriage. That led me to believe, and he tells this story on the other side of the water, that the way that we are painting this as though it used to all be all good in the hood, it's not true. Just because something has been normalized in a society doesn't mean that it's totally accepted. Doesn't mean that there isn't some resentment there. Doesn't mean that there isn't some retaliation. There are a lot of retaliation stories that you don't hear about, like people trying to poison other people. And all of these strivings, especially if the man has standing, the biblical stories come to life today in Nigeria. I mean, I know about it a little bit personally because, I have some cousins who are real life father straight off the continent. I say all that to say, let us continue to do our research before we smear a lot of this misinformation, disinformation. Sister Mayanah, wrap us up with James Baldwin. Let's hear what he got going on over there.
Absolutely. I'm going to just briefly touch on the Korean thing, and I'll tell you why. With the Korean dramas and the historical narratives that I tend to do, because I don't just watch their dramas or listen to their music, I studied their culture. And one of the things that I found, just try to mute your mic. Now
you hear me drinking my tea? Sister Mayanah,
I have feedback.
She's trying to silence me. Hold on.
Silence the Black woman. All right. What I found is that in the language and in the culture, there were aspects that were appealing, because first you see that it is a patriarchal society. The men have a strong sense of honor. They have a very strong sense of protecting the female principle, which allows for the feminine principle to be vulnerable to them. And it was interesting to see that dynamic. Also, the historical documentaries that I watched, they show where, because they're they're having kings and such, isn't that far in their past. You see how the concubines interacted with certain social strategies, so social stratus. That's what I'm looking for. Stratus. And so it's because of those kinds of things that are still embedded in that culture. And it's a close thing. Like Sister said before, we're very often told, oh, well, Asian women are more submissive than the so-called Black woman. And a lot of things are also in place in these cultures that are not in place in our culture. The men will not do certain things to women. They have a certain code of, or the society impresses a certain degree of onus on the man. So even if the man deviates from it, it's not socially acceptable. We have a culture that allows for, even encourages our men to disrespect us. So the idea of having this kind of where this submission and vulnerability would come from isn't there. The environment that would nurture that kind of vulnerability and submission just doesn't exist in the culture that we have allowed to kind of balloon out of control. And so the idea and the circumstances don't match up. And it's interesting to look at cultures that have that, and that the society is forcing what they want to see. So there's that. But so to give us to James Baldwin, he says a few interesting things. It's a book called Conversations with James Baldwin. It's by James Baldwin. And this particular, I'm reading to you from page 195. And someone by the name of Wolfgang Binder is interviewing him. There's several interviews, but this one is coming from Wolfgang Binder. And he says to Baldwin, what are your feelings on the role of the Black woman in the Black family? Do you share the opinion that the Black woman is overly strong? And Baldwin answers, that's all very curious. Women have a certain type of strength, men have another. He goes on to say, the whole myth, the whole confusion is, I think, mainly on the part of white people. There's a certain kind of vehemence between black women and Black men. I would not want to go so far as to say distrust. That is not true. You see, a Black man is both a man and a Black man in a white society. And his options for a time, for I think really something else is happening now, seems to have driven him away from the Black woman into the arms of the white woman. I think that may have run its course, that particular snare. But I think it's a mistake to put it in quite these terms. The Black woman has been accused of something I don't think she's guilty of. A certain kind of domination, a certain kind of dominance. She did have to hold the family together. She had to deal with her father, her mother, her husband, her son, somehow. But he goes on to speak specifically about our topic, the women's liberation movement. And he does that on page 197. He says, the women's liberation, let's put that on a level, does not include, now this is important, now, he's going to say something and I'm going to repeat it, does not include many Black women. Let me read that again. It does not include many Black women. Because Black women's problems are much more complex and much more down to earth. The women's liberation movement is a little like the gay movement in that it essentially is a white middle class phenomenon, which doesn't have any real organic connection with the Black situation on any level whatsoever. I have nothing against the women's liberation or gay liberation at all, but they are essentially à côté. It's interesting, this word is à côté, but it's French that means on the side. Okay, so for those of you who knew that, you knew that, but those that didn't know, à côté is a French word that means a side thing. They're essentially à côté. They're not really one of my prime concerns. And then to conclude, he says, the dangers my sisters face, my mother faced, have nothing to do with what women's liberation think it's about. Nothing at all. And those white women are not to embrace my mother and my sister unless my mother and my sister happen to work in the same office and are as bored as most white middle class women are. So it's not one of my concerns. I wish them luck. Then they should do something about Ronald Reagan if they want to be liberated. He is their creation, not mine, and their problem, not mine. And that is his answer to the question when asked if he shares the opinion that Black women are overly strong and his thoughts on the white liberation movement. So we see here that this is yet another thought, another witness, you might say, to the idea that there were not Black women in mass kumbayaing with white women in terms of this feminist movement. So this is not just these women saying it. It's not just these 5 women or the other peripheral women we have mentioned. It's not just W.E.B. Du Bois. This is also now another Black male voice, James Baldwin, who's living in the time, also giving witness that Black women were not saying the feminist movement is our movement, let's abandon our men. He's saying very clearly here that this was not a problem that had to do with us, and that the Black women were the ones that knew so. The Black women were the ones who were saying this is not about us. And she's going to later say something else to that extent as well, and the other articles that I will introduce to you as the conversation continues. That's one of the things that we're trying to combat here. Not just that there are men on one side saying, oh, you Black women got this thought from the feminist movement, but we have sisters that have adopted the same idea. Sister Mona, I'm going to make a statement. I'm going to need your response. Remember when we were watching the video, and one of the sisters was saying that if what the brother needed was for her to walk 10 paces behind him, then that's what she would do. And the host at that point said, sis, when you say that, it says to me that you have internalized the mythology that there is such a thing as the Black matriarchy, and that you must do that in order for him to feel like a man, because you agree or you feel like your presence is a hindrance. You have, see, that's something that we have accepted. We have heard it so many times that the reason that our men can't get where they're going, the reason our men feel as despondent as they do, is 100% our fault. And the only way for them to feel elevated is for us to be diminished, and even if it means to impose that diminishment on ourselves, then that's what we need to do. And that again, and the sister who had heard that or was responding to that said, this is the thought that you got from the Moynihan report, and you're accepting this. It's a myth. It's a myth. And we see all of these writings from men, from women, from all different positions of this movement, saying this is not real. This is a mythology. This is a political ploy. And he's mentioning Reagan here, which is interesting because this is happening in the 80s. This is 1980. And Ronald Reagan around this time has created the welfare queen. The welfare queen came from Ronald Reagan. He created this idea of there being a welfare queen. I think her name was Linda or Lydia Taylor or something, Lindsay Taylor, something like that.
We might have to bring that one up, a whole Jeezy on the welfare.
I didn't write it down, but
it's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, huh? Now here comes the train. It's okay. We gonna keep this one nice and short. We gonna come back. No worries, no stress. We gonna come back and talk about it more. Hopefully, if you just tuned in, we're gonna go ahead and wrap up. Now, this is the third installment. A lot of people are celebrating Black History Month or rebelling against the knowing of history, and it's not just enough to know history. We have to learn from it. I want to thank Sister Mayanah for reading that, because again, sources and information for you to go substantiate on your own is very important. There aren't any magic, bullets around, or little things that people want to dangle and not give you the source. It is our intent and our desire that you take this information and you read it for yourself, so that you can understand that when you are in spaces that you're going to engage, or if you have to go within your own thought processes and evaluate your own paradigms to see whether or not they're on faulty foundations, because a lot of conclusions that we reach to is because we were given faulty information. And the reality is, if we remove that faulty information, the whole thing might start crumbling. And a lot of us are afraid of that. And it's much easier to just believe the hype. But I'm here to tell you, don't believe the hype. Yeah, boy. Nah, but yeah. So, enjoy the conversation. Thank you, Sister Judith. Queen Nadira says polygamy in practice is very difficult indeed. And this is kind of why we're speaking to it, because it's not being presented like that. And a lot of people are being ensnared without all of the other things. It's something that they say, don't try this at home. Somebody come on the show, they come on the TV and they be like, do you see this? And they light it on fire. And then they be like, woo, and everybody, and they say, don't try this at home. Because this is stuff that you don't know about. You know what I mean? Like, you go around pushing swords in your throat, mess around, drop down dead. Don't try this at home. It should come with a warning label.
Our Sister Queen also is informing the people in the chat room that in the Quran, we even in this thing of polygyny, we tend to romanticize it, and we say that we see this particular this religious thought that also allows for it. But she's pointing out a very important fact, that it is heavily regulated, and it's not encouraged. There's a lot of things that you have to consider, whether in terms of whether or not you're going to enter this practice, how you're going to perform the practice. And we have a tendency of romanticizing. Oh, the people on the continent do it. And when we talk about all places where it's legal, let the record show that in a lot of these spaces where it's legal on the continent, it's legal for Muslims. It's not legal if you're on the continent. It's legal if you are a practicing Muslim.
It depends on
because the thought is that you are going to be regulated. You're not going to go and say, oh, like the sister says, this is the shorty from the corner store. To understand that there are very stringent, very important regulations that are in place. So even if you're on the continent, if you don't belong to this thought, you cannot practice polygyny. Even though it's legal in that area, you must be a practicing Muslim in order to reap or to be a participant of that, to gain any benefit from that allowance.
I'll share that. Thank you for that, Sister Mayanah. We're gonna wrap up. I'll share. I can't remember if the guy was from Kenya or Nigeria, but he had like 90 something, and the people wanted to call the authorities on him because he had way too many wives, and he was old too. It's like there's one in Ethiopia, but there's also one, I think he's either in Nigeria or Kenya. He was in one of the countries, and it's like no regulation, because again, that's another conversation, because it needs to be had on a continuum, because for every one that falls off, two more come, and they're being told this and being cajoled and massaged and mentally manipulated, men and women. And in order for us to build, we have to repair. You know what I'm saying? Everybody, let's build. Build what? You ain't even, repair first. You got broken, jacked up bricks, and you over here talking about you building. But with that said, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. We're going to come back, most I will, in next week to continue the conversation. I think it picks up on this the issue of abortion, which is a huge issue and still prevalent even onto today, where the large majority of aborted children come from the womb of a melanated woman. Like, a lot of men are upset about this conversation because they say, well, you women, man, you talk about a good game, but when it comes to taking responsibility for what you're doing, again, you fall quiet. You know what I'm saying? You ain't talking. What's up with that? And so we're going to take a look at that next week and look at both sides of the spectrum as it relates to after the seed has been planted and who planted the seed. You know what I'm saying? And so we're going to have this conversation. And if you can't wait until then, I did an interview with Reverend Childress. And if anybody knows who Reverend Childress is, he is at the forefront of the abortion issue within the community. He did the film Black Genocide. So you could look up that interview. I had him on last year, and we had that conversation. So this is not new to the conversation, but we have to have this conversation because this is another big issue in the community. People are having 6, 7, 8 abortions and treating them as though they're like the afterbirth pill. And then when they want to have children, the cervix has been so badly destroyed that the body can't retain the fetus anymore. I know it sounds gruesome, and a lot of people are gonna be like, whatever, but we have to talk about it. We're not afraid to go into these specific areas because they have to be, it all gotta get fanned out. So with that said, you know what I mean? I want to thank everybody for tuning in. We have a channel that is going to be, because this is my personal channel, so we highlight from here as well. We have a channel that is going to be a combination of all of the works of this kind as it deals with thank you so much, Sister Nadera, as it deals with the issues that are plaguing the melanated community, more specifically speaking from the vantage point of the feminine principle, whose voice oftentimes gets drowned out. And so we're going to have the channel, Mayanah, what's the name? Under the Palm. Under the Palm. Hebrew Women Speak. And so if you're interested, what we're going to have is a lot of archivals, because we realize like there's a lot of them just floating. And if we put them in one area, then that might be more beneficial. So look out for that, Under the Palm, Hebrew Women Speak, where we'll be having debate talk for you conversations, these conversations, and others that we've had like this in the past. So with that said, everybody have a blessed night and get that research in, y'all. Get that research in. One.
Right.
Oh, wait. This show has brought to you, but this show has yeah, how could I forget? Like, this show has been brought to you by the C3 Challenge. So go ahead and look in the description box, c3challenge.club, because after all of this, you know, we're going to find out that a lot of us is full of, you know what, and it's going to be about that time for a cleanse. All right. So check it out, ask any questions, and hopefully we'll see you on the other side of this conversation. One.